Welcome, the Lord's chosen. The truth doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it kicks the door off the hinges and drags every hidden snake into the light. Chosen ones. Buckle up, because what's unfolding here is the kind of plot twist even Hollywood would reject for being too realistic. What you're about to hear isn't rumor, exaggeration, or paranoia. It's the uncomfortable reality of what happens when people plot behind your back and finally realize the universe has better investigators than the police department. And trust me, those investigators work overtime. Here's a fact to set the tone. Over 70% of confessions happen not because someone feels guilty, but because they're afraid the truth will expose them first. That's exactly what's happening here. Someone didn't suddenly grow a conscience, they grew fear, real fear. The kind that hits when they realize the trap they set for you is now snapping shut around them. But let's be honest for a second. How wild is it that you're living a life so intense? People need to confess just to sleep at night. Chosen ones, you aren't living an episode. You are the season finale. And the villains, well, let's just say they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. If plotting against you was a group project, they'd still be failing. Still, jokes aside, there's a reason this situation feels so heavy, so eerie, so charged. It's because when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't whisper, it detonates. These people genuinely believe they could scheme, manipulate, and twist outcomes without consequences, as if destiny itself wasn't watching with popcorn in hand. But here's the twist. Either they confess, or the police will. Their own actions have become the evidence, their own intentions the fingerprints, and their own behavior the testimony. This is the moment where everything shifts, the moment the masks melt, the secrets crawl out from the shadows, and the plot they built for your downfall becomes the script for their unraveling. And you're just standing there, minding your own business, trying to figure out why your life suddenly looks like a deleted scene from a crime documentary. So sit tight, because what comes next will shake your understanding of loyalty, expose the dark instincts people hide, and show exactly why their confession wasn't an act of courage. It was an act of survival. Number one, they never expected you to survive long enough to see their true faces. This truth hits hard because it exposes a level of arrogance most people don't want to admit exists. The ones plotting behind your back didn't just hope you'd fail. They banked on it. They structured their behavior, their lies, their attitude, and even their confidence on the belief that you would collapse before you ever reached the point where their masks could slip. You were never supposed to last long enough to witness the ugliness behind their smiles. Your strength wasn't in their calculations, and that's exactly why everything is falling apart for them now. For a long time, they treated you like a temporary character in your own story, someone who wouldn't have the endurance or the awareness to recognize patterns. They assumed life would drain you, that circumstances would crush you, that people would turn you bitter or confused or exhausted. They counted on your past wounds to do the work for them. In their minds, your downfall wasn't just likely, it was guaranteed. And that's why they were bold enough to behave the way they did. When someone thinks you're not going to make it, they stop taking care of what they hide. But then something unexpected happened. You didn't break. You didn't fade. You didn't disappear. Instead, you stayed standing long enough for their real behavior to come into full view. And that's the part that terrifies them the most, because now they're exposed in a way they never prepared for. They showed their intentions too soon, revealed their selfishness too clearly, and underestimated your ability to pay attention. The moment you survived past their forecast was the moment their whole plan became a liability. Their words started contradicting their actions. Their confidence cracked. Their stories became shaky. That's when confession happens. Not because they're sorry, but because they realize the person they tried to write off is still here, fully awake, fully aware, and fully able to connect every single dot. You weren't supposed to make it to this stage, but you did, and now they're forced to face the truth you were never meant to see. Number 2, the moment you became useful to them was the same moment they started planning your exit. This point is harsh, but it's one of the most honest truths people rarely acknowledge. The ones who plotted against you never valued you for who you were. They valued you for what you could offer them. The access you gave, the support you provided, the opportunities you opened, the comfort you unintentionally supplied. To them, you weren't a person, you were a function. And once someone sees you as a function, they also start calculating the moment that function stops benefiting them. The moment you became useful, a silent countdown began in their minds. They enjoyed taking from you, but they never planned to keep you around. Why? Because usefulness breeds dependency, and dependency exposes their insecurities. They hated needing anything from you, even while they depended heavily on you. That contradiction created resentment, the kind that slowly turns into sabotage. In their hearts, they were scared of the day you'd wake up to your own worth, so they tried to push you out before that happened. People like this operate on a selfish timeline. The minute they sense you're becoming too strong, too aware, too confident, or too independent, they start preparing their exit strategy. And the cruel part is that they try to make you look like the problem so they can slip away clean. Your growth threatened their control. Your clarity threatened their narrative. Your evolution threatened the version of you they were comfortable using. This is why betrayal from these people feels confusing. One day they praise you, the next they're distant, and eventually they're plotting behind your back. But the truth is simple. They never intended to stay once you no longer fit the role they assigned you. They planned their departure while still benefiting from your presence. What exposed them was that you didn't fall apart, you didn't cling, you didn't shrink. When you kept rising, they panicked. Their resentment turned into strategy, and their strategy turned into confession, because deep down, they knew you had finally stepped out of the box they built for you. Their plan started when your usefulness began. Their downfall started the moment you outgrew it. Number 3, their betrayal wasn't sudden. It was a portfolio they built over time. The betrayal you're facing didn't appear out of nowhere. It wasn't a random moment of anger, jealousy, or impulse. It was carefully constructed, methodically planned, and nurtured like an investment. People who plot against you treat your downfall like a portfolio, tracking every weakness, every hesitation, every pattern in your behavior. They collect information as if it were currency, catalog mistakes as if they were stocks, and wait patiently for the perfect moment to cash in on your vulnerability. That's why the moment of betrayal hits like a thunderclap. It feels sudden because you weren't paying attention to the fine print of their intentions. These people spend years studying how to manipulate you without being noticed. They observe how you respond under pressure, who you trust, what excites you, what frustrates you, and what makes you uncomfortable. Every conversation, every interaction, every seemingly innocent disagreement is filed away in their mental archive, ready to be referenced when they think it's time to strike. The more they believe they understand you, the bolder they become, and that's where the danger lies. They don't just stumble into betrayal, they design it. When you finally realize what they've been doing, it's almost mesmerizing to see the layers unfold. Each act of kindness they offered might have been calculated to disarm you. Each supportive word could have been a setup for control. Their entire relationship with you becomes a map of intentions and misdirection. And the horrifying part is how systematic it is. They treat you like a case study, a strategy session, and a battlefield all in one. What exposes them, however, is the assumption that their portfolio would never be questioned. They didn't anticipate that you would connect the dots, notice the pattern, and recognize that nothing was coincidental. Their betrayal was never a moment. It was a slow, deliberate process designed to make you powerless. But by surviving, observing, and reflecting, you turn that portfolio inside out. The collection of their schemes becomes the evidence of their true intentions. The careful construction of your downfall is now the proof of their guilt, and that realization is far more powerful than any sudden act of violence. They built the trap, but you saw it coming from the start. Number 4, they thought you would break quietly, not fight publicly. This is where their arrogance becomes glaringly obvious. The people plotting against you never imagined that you would respond with clarity, strength, and awareness. In their minds, you were supposed to crumble silently, to retreat into confusion and doubt, to let their schemes play out unnoticed. They counted on you being quiet, isolated, and manageable, the kind of person who bends under pressure without making waves. That assumption is what gave them confidence. That assumption is what made them bold enough to reveal their true intentions. They never expected you to see through the layers of deceit. Every manipulation, every lie, every hidden agenda was designed with the belief that you'd never confront it head-on. They imagined a scenario where your shock would be enough to paralyze you, where fear would cage you, and where their plan would continue unhindered. But you didn't react that way. You didn't fold, cry, or run away. Instead, you stayed upright, alert, and observant. You didn't need to scream or lash out. You let your awareness do the talking. Your calm, collected presence became a mirror, reflecting their intentions back at them, exposing what they thought would remain hidden. When you fight publicly, even in subtle ways, it destroys the illusion they carefully built. Their confidence wavers because their power relied entirely on secrecy and control. As soon as you step into the light, their narrative crumbles. Their lies become obvious. Their manipulation becomes transparent. And their panic starts to show in ways they never anticipated. They weren't prepared for someone who doesn't just survive the plot, but thrives while exposing it. The terrifying realization for them is that the quiet, obedient version of you never existed, and that's why they're scrambling. They believed silence would be your weapon, but instead, your presence and vigilance became theirs. They thought they could control the story by keeping you in the dark, but you turned the tables simply by refusing to be invisible. Their schemes, once invisible, are now illuminated, and that exposure is far more devastating than any physical confrontation. You didn't break quietly, and that's why everything they built against you is falling apart. Number 5, they weren't just jealous, they were terrified that you'd outgrow them. The truth about people who plot against you is rarely about envy in the ordinary sense. It's deeper, darker, and far more personal. They weren't just jealous of your achievements or your opportunities. They were terrified of the day you would surpass them so completely that their presence in your life would become meaningless. This fear isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It hides behind casual comments, fake smiles, and calculated kindness. But underneath it, every action is designed to contain you, to keep you from rising to the level where you no longer need them, and where they can't manipulate you anymore. People like this live in a world of mental spreadsheets. They track who depends on them, who can be controlled, and who could potentially make them irrelevant. The second category, the ones who threaten their importance, becomes a target. They may attempt to charm you, confuse you, or distract you from your own momentum, all while convincing themselves they are acting out of concern or loyalty. But the reality is brutal. Their fear of being outgrown drives their strategy. They plan, they scheme, and they maneuver because the idea of losing their psychological foothold over you is unbearable. This terror of being outshined is why betrayal is often so meticulous. They don't just act, they prepare. They try to predict your moves, undermine your confidence subtly, and even manipulate circumstances to stunt your progress. Every step you take toward independence or self-mastery is a step that triggers panic in them. They can't tolerate the thought that you could evolve beyond their reach, because evolution exposes their weaknesses, their limitations, and their insecurities. What makes this fear so obvious is how transparent it becomes once you refuse to be small. The moment you begin asserting your boundaries, claiming your power, and embracing your own growth, their panic is palpable. Confessions surface, lies unravel, and their true motives are revealed. They weren't merely jealous. They were scared, desperate, and cornered by the very strength they underestimated. And in that moment, it becomes clear. The more you grow, the more exposed they become, and the more powerless they feel against the unstoppable force of your rise. Number 6. They confessed because they realized you don't need revenge. Reality is doing it for you. The confession you're witnessing isn't born from guilt, morality, or conscience. It's born from fear. People who plot against you assume that power lies in their hands, that control over your life gives them the upper hand. They believe that by acting first, by manipulating events or pushing boundaries, they can dictate outcomes. What they fail to account for is that reality has a way of balancing the scales, often in ways they never imagined. When they confess, it's not because they feel remorse. It's because they see that your life, your awareness, and your presence are already unraveling their plans without you having to lift a finger. You don't seek revenge, and that's precisely why they panic. A person looking for retaliation is predictable. They plot, they anticipate, they react. But someone who simply survives, thrives, and exposes the truth through clarity and observation is unstoppable. Reality itself becomes the mechanism that turns their schemes against them. Every lie they built, every manipulation they executed, every corner they thought they could trap you in now reflects back on them. The fear of this reflection, the fear of watching their own intentions unravel without any external force, is what forces them to confess. Their confession is essentially an acknowledgement that they lost control. They realized that their clever plans, their calculated deceit, and their manipulations are powerless against a life lived with awareness and integrity. You didn't need to fight them directly. You didn't need to create chaos. By simply existing fully, by being aware, by observing, and by refusing to be trapped in the roles they assigned you, you allowed reality to take its course. The truth is that reality is ruthless in its impartiality. It doesn't negotiate, it doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive on anyone's timetable. By the time they confess, they see that their own actions, not your responses, are doing the work of exposing them. You are a force they cannot control, and the very systems they tried to manipulate have already turned against them. Their confession is just the formal acknowledgement that the universe and your unshakable presence already won the battle they thought they'd start. Number 7, they wanted you gone because your existence made their lies impossible to maintain. The hardest part about betrayal is understanding that it isn't always about what you did. It's about the threat your presence poses. People who plot against you often don't simply dislike you, they fear you. Your existence, your awareness, and your clarity are like mirrors reflecting their true intentions, exposing every inconsistency in the story they've been telling themselves and the world. They need you gone, not because of anything specific you did, but because the longer you remain, the harder it becomes for them to maintain their carefully constructed illusions. Every lie they spun, every manipulation they attempted, every hidden agenda they nurtured relied on your absence, ignorance, or silence. They thought they could control the narrative by keeping you in the dark. But the moment you saw through the layers, their whole foundation started to crack. Your awareness is a threat because it makes transparency unavoidable. Once you exist fully and observe clearly, their stories, their intentions, and their manipulations become impossible to hide. The lies they believed would protect them instead became chains, binding them to the truth they tried to avoid. The irony is brutal. They may have planned, schemed, and manipulated for months or even years, but they didn't anticipate that the very person they targeted would become the force that exposed them. You didn't have to confront them directly in every instance. Your presence alone is a constant reminder of accountability. Every interaction, every word, every success of yours highlights the gaps in the narrative they hope to sell. When they finally confess, it isn't because they've developed a conscience. It's because reality itself cornered them. They can no longer sustain the lies without slipping, without revealing the cracks. They realize that your existence has already done what their plans could never accomplish. It has forced truth into the open. You didn't need to dismantle them with confrontation or strategy. The simple fact that you are awake, aware, and unyielding made maintaining their deception impossible. And that is why they panic, confess, and scramble. The truth you embody dismantled the very web they spun to control reality itself. Number 8, they failed because they underestimated your core, not your circumstances. One of the most brutal truths about people who plot against you is how consistently they misjudge where your strength really lies. They spend hours, days, sometimes years analyzing your environment, tracking your habits, calculating every possible vulnerability, and yet they completely ignore the one factor they cannot control, the core of who you are. They think that by manipulating situations, isolating you, or stacking obstacles against you, they can break you. What they fail to understand is that your circumstances are temporary, but your essence, your resilience, your awareness, your instincts cannot be undermined by external pressure. They attack your environment because it's visible, measurable, and easier to manipulate. They assume that if they control the narrative, the money, the people around you, or even the small opportunities, they control you. But what they don't account for is your inner foundation, the part of you that stays grounded even when the world around you is in chaos. That's where their plans crumble. They misjudge because they equate influence with dominance, control with power, and manipulation with inevitability. They forget that someone who knows their own worth, keeps their awareness sharp, and trusts their instincts is impossible to corner completely. Every scheme they devised, every plan they executed, every manipulation they attempted was aimed at circumstances, not character. They didn't fail because their plan was flawed. They failed because they assumed circumstances define a person. They overlooked the fact that your core, the combination of awareness, resilience, and intuition, is impervious to their tactics. And that's why, no matter how carefully they orchestrated events, no matter how cleverly they tried to isolate or intimidate you, the entire plan backfired. The moment they realized their calculations were useless, panic set in. Their confidence eroded because they understood too late that they never had real control. The truth is simple. You survived and exposed them not because life was easy, not because circumstances favored you, but because your core remained unshakable. And that unshakable core is what they underestimated. And ultimately, it's what destroyed their entire scheme. Number 9, they forgot that people with good intentions don't need to hide anything from the police. The moment someone begins to plot against you, their mindset becomes a maze of deception, lies, and carefully crafted facades. They think that by hiding evidence, twisting truths, or manipulating the perception of others, they can maintain control over the outcome. What they fail to realize is a simple, almost unshakable truth. People with integrity never feel the need to cover themselves. Their actions, their words, and their decisions exist in the open because they have nothing to fear from scrutiny. Those who plot against you, on the other hand, live in constant terror of being seen, caught, or exposed. When they plan harm, their entire world becomes a house of cards. Every interaction is calculated, every movement is monitored, and every lie is meticulously placed to avoid detection. They spend so much energy hiding that they forget the fundamental difference between guilt and innocence. They forget that someone who does not act with malicious intent walks through life freely, without the weight of secrets, without the constant fear that someone, somewhere, is watching closely. Their paranoia blinds them. The idea that the police, authority, or even an observant third party could uncover their actions becomes a nightmare because in their minds, exposure equals destruction. This fear is exactly what leads to confession. When they realize that their schemes are unraveling, that evidence is surfacing, or that their lies are being challenged, panic sets in. They confess not because they suddenly feel remorse or moral awakening, but because they understand that the system, both legal and natural, is aligned against them. The very precautions they took to avoid exposure now highlight their intent, turning their attempts at secrecy into proof of wrongdoing. Meanwhile, you, standing on the side of truth, have nothing to hide. Your clarity, your integrity, and your awareness put you in a position where their tactics cannot touch you. They miscalculated because they assumed that deception could protect them from someone like you, someone whose presence, observation, and honesty make the truth unavoidable. And in that realization, fear overwhelms them, forcing them to confess, not out of conscience, but because they know that reality and the law will handle the consequences they so desperately tried to avoid. Number 10, they realize that they never believed you deserved a future. The darkest part of plotting against someone isn't always the action itself, it's the mindset behind it. The people who wanted to harm you never truly saw you as worthy of growth, success, or happiness. In their calculations, your future wasn't something to nurture, it was something to control, limit, or erase. They never viewed you as a person with potential. They saw you as an obstacle, a resource, or a pawn. Their plotting wasn't just about getting ahead for themselves. It was about ensuring that you never fully realized your own power or claimed the life you were meant to live. What's terrifying is how subtly this belief manifests. It isn't always verbal or confrontational. Often it hides behind casual dismissals, passive-aggressive behavior, or calculated advice meant to keep you small. They subtly attempt to reshape your perception of what you deserve, implant doubt in your mind, and manipulate circumstances so that your potential seems unreachable. Every scheme, every act of sabotage, every lie is rooted in this belief that you don't deserve to thrive, to rise above, or to step into the fullness of your life. The moment they realize you've ignored their attempts to stunt you is the moment panic sets in. They confess, not out of guilt, but because the foundation of their control has crumbled. Their whole worldview depended on you believing that you weren't worthy, that the world was too big, too complex, or too dangerous for you to claim what is rightfully yours. Your resilience, clarity, and determination expose their worldview as false. You exist, you move forward, and you succeed in spite of them, and that reality terrifies them. The confession they offer is less about admitting wrongdoing and more about the acknowledgement of their failure. They see perhaps for the first time that their belief in your undeserving nature was a lie they told themselves to justify cruelty. Your presence, your growth, and your survival prove that you were always deserving of a future, and their realization of this truth is both their panic and their undoing. You were never meant to be confined by their limitations, and that is the most devastating truth for anyone who tried to cage you. Number 11, they didn't expect you to have receipts, memory, and intuition working together. One of the most overlooked powers of a person being targeted is their ability to observe, remember, and connect dots that others assume will remain hidden. The ones plotting against you operate under the false confidence that manipulation is enough, that lies can cover their tracks, and that control over circumstances is the ultimate weapon. They forget one crucial factor. You are not just living through events. You are documenting them, consciously or unconsciously, with a combination of memory, intuition, and evidence. Every word spoken, every action taken, every suspicious pattern is stored and analyzed. They don't anticipate that you notice what they think goes unseen. Receipts, whether literal or metaphorical, become your silent allies. Texts, calls, conversations, or even fleeting behaviors that seemed insignificant to them are everything to you. Combined with memory, you can reconstruct timelines, spot contradictions, and map their intentions with precision. Intuition then ties it all together. It's not just about what happened, but about the why behind it, the unspoken motives, and the gaps between words and actions. What they assumed would remain hidden or ambiguous suddenly becomes clear to you. They thought your reactions would be based on emotion alone, but you operate on evidence and instinct simultaneously, and that combination terrifies them. This is why their panic and eventual confession seem almost inevitable. They never expected someone to have such a comprehensive awareness of their schemes. They assumed that secrecy, charm, and manipulation were enough to protect them. But the truth is that by the time they realize how much you've observed and connected, it's too late. They see that every layer they tried to hide behind has been peeled back, and the patterns are undeniable. The very tools they overlooked, your memory, your intuition, and your ability to compile receipts, become the mechanism that exposes them. They confess not because they feel remorse, but because they understand that your awareness leaves no room for deception. The map of their intentions exists in your mind, and reality itself is backing you up. They miscalculated who they were dealing with, and that miscalculation becomes their downfall. Number 12, they realized too late that you're the worst person to betray because you don't seek revenge, you seek clarity. The most dangerous person in the eyes of a manipulator is not the one who plots retaliation, but the one who refuses to play by their rules entirely. The people who tried to harm you made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that betrayal would provoke anger, violence, or desperate attempts at payback. What they failed to understand is that you operate differently. You don't react impulsively, you don't let emotion dictate your actions, and you don't expend energy on revenge. Instead, you pursue clarity, truth, and understanding, and that is far more devastating than any impulsive retaliation. When you seek clarity, you dissect every action, analyze every word, and uncover every hidden motive. You observe patterns over time, connecting behaviors that seem unrelated to everyone else, exposing the strategy that was meant to remain invisible. Your calm, deliberate approach dismantles their narratives more thoroughly than any confrontation could. They believed that fear or confusion would keep you silent, that betrayal would leave you vulnerable. Instead, your methodical presence forces the truth into the open, making their intentions undeniable to anyone paying attention. This is why confession becomes inevitable. They see their carefully laid plans unraveling, not because of loud confrontation, but because you exist as a living record of awareness and discernment. Every lie they told, every manipulation they attempted, and every step they took to control circumstances is now exposed through your clarity. They realize too late that the person they underestimated doesn't need to retaliate to exact consequences. Their own actions, when observed and revealed, are punishment enough. The irony is profound. By refusing to engage in revenge, by choosing clarity over chaos, you neutralize their schemes completely. Their fear of exposure, their desperation to regain control, and their eventual confession all stem from the same realization. You cannot be deceived, you cannot be cornered, and you cannot be provoked into predictable responses. In trying to betray you, they awakened a force far stronger than retaliation. They awakened your awareness, your insight, and your ability to make the truth undeniable. And that is what makes them fail spectacularly. Number 13. The moment they tried to remove you was the moment God put surveillance on everything they touched. There's a strange, almost poetic justice in the way plans to harm you often collapse under their own weight. The people who plotted against you believed they were operating in secrecy, thinking that every move, every whisper, every step was hidden from view. They imagined a world where their intentions could remain invisible, where consequences could be managed, and where you could be controlled without anyone noticing. But the moment they decided to act against you, a force far greater than their schemes seemed to intervene. Every detail they thought was secure became traceable. Every hidden action became exposed, and the very energy they put into plotting your downfall became the mechanism of their exposure. This isn't about superstition. It's about cause and effect magnified by awareness and consequences. When someone tries to unalive your potential, their energy, intent, and planning create a ripple. That ripple intersects with circumstances, witnesses, and outcomes in ways they cannot predict. Every phone call they thought private, every step they believed hidden, every manipulation they assumed unnoticed starts to surface. Their own hands, the instruments of harm, leave fingerprints in the most literal and figurative sense. They are monitored, not because they realize it, but because the natural order always aligns against those who target someone meant to rise. And that's why confession becomes inevitable. They start seeing the cracks, the lies, manipulations, and secretive moves no longer protect them. They expose them. Panic sets in, not from conscience, but from the realization that their actions cannot remain secret. They feel trapped, aware that everything they touched while plotting is now evidence against them, while the person they intended to harm continues to stand untouched, observant, and aware. This moment reveals a simple but powerful truth. Malice, when directed at someone strong, awake, and resilient, often rebounds. Their plans don't just fail, they illuminate their own darkness. The moment they tried to remove you, they unknowingly set in motion their own exposure, turning every act of plotting into proof of guilt. Their confession is the inevitable acknowledgement that the force they tried to escape, the truth, the universe, or divine timing, was already watching. Number 14. What they planned for your destruction became the exact situation that exposed their darkness. The cruel irony of betrayal is often its own undoing. The people who plotted against you invested so much time, energy, and thought into orchestrating your downfall that they failed to see how their actions were building the very trap they would eventually fall into. Every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to control or harm you was a thread in a web that, instead of ensnaring you, revealed the true measure of their character to anyone who was paying attention. What they intended as a tool for destruction became a spotlight, illuminating the darkness within them. They believed that secrecy, Cunning and intimidation would allow them to carry out their plans unnoticed. They thought they were the authors of your fate, calculating every move, every misstep, every reaction. But in reality, plotting against someone awake and aware is like building a house on sand. The more they dug, the more unstable their position became. Every scheme intended to weaken you instead highlighted their desperation, their insecurity, and their moral corruption. Their efforts to hide themselves from scrutiny only amplified the evidence of their true intentions. This is why their confession eventually comes. They see that the very plan designed to remove you from the picture has become undeniable proof of their deceit. The lies they told to manipulate outcomes no longer protect them. The manipulations they used to gain advantage now act as mirrors reflecting their greed, fear, and malice. In attempting to destroy you, they've handed over the evidence that ensures the world and the authorities see them exactly as they are. The lesson is clear. Evil plotted in the dark rarely remains hidden. The energy they poured into harming you becomes the mechanism of exposure. Their strategy, designed to control and harm, backfires spectacularly because they underestimated the consequences of their own intentions. What they built to bury you became the stage where their betrayal was revealed. In the end, their darkness could not be contained. It spilled into the light, and they are left to face it, confess it, and live with the undeniable reality that their own actions exposed them before they could ever harm you. Conclusion. In the end, the story of betrayal, schemes, and confessions isn't just about the darkness of others. It's about the unshakable strength of someone who refuses to be controlled or diminished. Every plan to harm you, every manipulation, and every hidden agenda ultimately failed not because of luck, but because you embodied awareness, resilience, and clarity. The people who plotted against you underestimated your core, misjudged your presence, and miscalculated the power of truth. Their schemes, meticulously crafted over time, became their own undoing, and their confessions serve as evidence that malice cannot withstand light. You didn't need to fight back with anger, retaliation, or revenge. You survived by observing, by holding space for clarity, and by refusing to shrink in the shadow of others' intentions. Every betrayal, every attempt to limit you, only exposed the fragility of those who believed they could dictate your fate. And the lesson is clear. Awareness and resilience are far more formidable than deception, manipulation, or fear. When someone tries to harm a person who is awake and grounded, their actions reflect back on them, unraveling their own plots and revealing truths they wished had stayed hidden. This isn't just a story of survival, it's a story of triumph. Your strength forced the confession, exposed the lies, and turned every plot against you into proof of character, for both you and them. It's a reminder that darkness cannot persist in the presence of unyielding clarity, and that the truth eventually always finds a way to surface. If you found this insight powerful, impactful, and eye-opening, make sure to subscribe to the channel to uncover more truths that people often try to hide. Don't forget to like, comment, and share so others can see how awareness, resilience, and clarity turn betrayal into strength. Your engagement helps bring these lessons into the light, where they belong. Stay blessed always.